Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to call this Division 3 of House Finance work session to order. For the record, I am State Representative Maureen Mooney, the chairman of Division 3, and I'm from the town of Merrimack. Our work session today is only on House Bill 1750. That is the only piece of business we'll take up in today's work session, House Bill 1750. We do have some absences today, so I want to thank Representative Geeson and Representative Mattson, welcome back, for covering. We really appreciate that, and I know it's a complicated day, and you'll be here for the morning and then the afternoon piece of it. So thank you all for being here. This meeting was properly noticed according to House Rule 44. It's House Rule 44 that covers the notices and when things can be scheduled, whether or not they're work sessions, exec sessions, hearings, etc. Our role is we recommend to full finance, which incidentally meets this afternoon, scheduled for 2:30. And our options, according to House Rule 45 in year 2 of the term, to recommend a full finance are as follows: ought to pass with amendment, inexpedient to legislate, refer for interim study, and recommended but to be laid upon the table because of funding. So there is that. As for rules with regards to deadlines, our deadlines for these bills is March 5th. And the deadline for crossover, that is March 26th, 2026. That is in accordance to House Rule 66. It's House Rule 66 that covers deadlines. Anything from the members? Representative Tularsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you can see, our colleague, Representative Priest, who's usually here with us, was very disappointed he couldn't be here for the final work session on House Bill 1750. And I know he has emailed a number of people with concerns over this bill and others, but I just wanted to take the opportunity. I printed out his testimony that he wants to make sure gets into the record, so I have copies for everyone. And I'm going to pass that out, and hopefully, or not hopefully, his remarks will be in the permanent file on this bill for the journal. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So you're distributing at this point a statement submitted for the record by Representative Priest, who could not be here today, on House Bill 1750. So that statement is being distributed to each of the members, and an extra copy will go into the file, House Bill 1750, statement by Representative David Priest. Thank you. Okay, speaking of distributions, at each of your places should be a table, which we will discuss today with the Department of Health and Human Services on this House Bill 1750, the title of which, making a supplemental appropriation to the Department of Health and Human Services for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. Couple of things first. What I'm interested in before the department comes up is we've been talking a lot of percentages. And in our last work session, which is hard to believe was a week ago, it feels like I was just here. But percentages. Today I would like to talk dollars as best we can. And I know we'll go through this chart, but for example, $24 million to run the SNAP program administratively a year in this state. $24 million is my understanding of this. The $154 million, those are the benefits. Those don't come to the state. Those are not part of the state budget. Those go directly to those that receive SNAP benefits, which in our state, approximately 75,000 people total. Okay, so dollars is kind of the theme. If we could work that in, if possible, that would be great. Mr. White, if you'd like to come and explain the chart, and Ms. Hebert, you're certainly welcome to come as well. And thank you both for being here and taking time. I know also this conflicts with Health and Human Services Oversight Committee, which I'm a member, and both of you are regulars, which is taking place just below us in this building. And I appreciate you being here to help us out.
Good morning. Thank you. Karen Hebert, Director of the Division of Economic Stability.
And Nathan White, Chief Financial Officer with the Department of Health and Human Services. The chart that is before you, we had put this together based on the discussions of the committee and a request to provide some ratios on what the cost of operating the program is. I think one important thing to understand is the in front of you where you see the admin total spend, all funds. That's not necessarily only the cost to run the program. The cost to technically run the program is less than that. And I'm going to get a little technical here because I just want to provide a little clarity. The department utilizes a cost allocation system. And that cost allocation system allows us to maximize federal funds. So when we think about what that $24 million means, it doesn't only mean the folks that are directly working on SNAP. It also means the contracts, but just as importantly, if you have somebody who's working on eligibility and they're tracking their time and that time is attributed to SNAP, we can claim those admin dollars. The way our cost allocation system maximizes those dollars is their supervisor. We can also claim a piece of SNAP admin for them and their supervisor and our division director and our associate commissioner and our commissioner. And so when we think about what the true cost is to run the program, I think that question is a little bit nuanced, but I just don't want people to walk away the impression that it costs $24 million to run this. It's like, well, technically it costs less, but because of the way that we maximize our federal funds, that's the number that you're looking at here. So I just want to provide a little bit of clarity there before we move into the details. And this generally follows a theme that all of you are used to with HHS. Nothing is simple, but everything is explainable. So in front of you there, you have the $75,000 or the 75,000 SNAP participants as of December 2025. We then took the full federal SNAP total spend from federal fiscal year 24. And as Chairman Mooney indicated, these are dollars that never touch the department's budget. They never touch the state's budget. Those are the direct benefits via the EBT cards. And then below that, you have the state fiscal year 25 admin spend. And this is the total spend. This is not the budget. The budget is a plan. It's a point of departure. The actual spend is less than that. So that was the spend in 25. So we put together a couple of ratios down below there. The first ratio basically represents what's the daily administrative cost. Again, it depends on what you consider administrative, but the daily administrative cost per participant at about 89 cents. And then in this federal fiscal year 26, that's the next line down or next row down is the state administrative cost per dollar distributed, which comes out to about 8 cents. So for every dollar that moves directly to a participant, there is an overhead cost of about 8 cents. But again, I just want to emphasize that cost not only represents running the program, but it also represents the department's ability to maximize the federal dollars to benefit the state budget. So I can kind of pause there just to see if there's any questions.
Okay, Representative Nelevanko for a question.
Thank you, Mr. White and Ms. Ebert, for showing up to testify today. So are these costs kind of the 8 cents typical across a period of time, or I'm sure it varies a little bit, a range of costs here if you were looking at this program over the last few years? Is this indicative of what it typically runs?
I think that would very much depend upon the number of participants and the year. I did not do the analysis to look at it from a historical perspective to understand if there were more participants in 2012 or 2011 following like the Great Recession versus 2020 during the pandemic or 2025. I didn't do that analysis, but I think ultimately that ratio would very much be driven by the number of participants.
Skip follow-up.
Follow up.
Yeah, and the follow-up question is then, if the number of participants is the key to this, so last couple of years, I know you haven't looked at this all the way back, but is this a number that's increasing, decreasing, stable?
Go ahead.
The trend for the last few years has pretty much been steady.
Flat?
Maybe a fluctuation of a fraction of a percentage, if that helps. So it's been pretty steady.
Okay, it does, because then that would mean that the number that we've got here, the 8 cents and whatever is
Yes.
also pretty stable if the key is the number of participants.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Talarsky, followed by Representative Stringham.
Thank you for that explanation. So just to make sure I understand this, the 24 million, which is a much bigger umbrella of different eligibility work that has to happen. If we're trying to boil it down to SNAP, it's smaller, if not significantly smaller. So do I translate that down to the ratio that 8 cents per dollar is actually less when we're talking about breaking out the SNAP program alone, even though I understand we can't do that?
Yes, your overhead cost would be something less there.
Yep.
Again, it's a function of us attempting to maximize federal funds that are available.
Okay. And so, sorry, one last. And additionally, that the daily administrative cost per participant would also be less for the SNAP program. Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Stringham.
So right now, essentially the FMAP or the federal share is 50%. So of the 24 million, 12 million then comes back into the state from the federal government once the cost accounting is verified and so on. If we spend less, then we get less from the federal government. So the nod I'll take as confirming that. I know you have quite a talented staff that works on the overhead allocation. We saw quite significant savings to the New Hampshire taxpayers based on some of the work that was done between the previous biennium and this one. Would you anticipate a change in the formula that could be affected soon enough because our share drops to 25% for this particular federal benefit category from 50%, such that, now this fully allocated cost that represents here might be a little bit less, even with the same direct effort going into supporting our SNAP beneficiaries. I hope that's clear, but
Just to clarify, which formula?
Well, a formula you use is how much of the supervisor's time is apportioned to SNAP versus maybe disability benefits or somewhere else. Perhaps right now you have some people who are spending 5% of their time on SNAP. It might go to 2% or the other way.
I would not necessarily anticipate any significant change in the methodology that would generate savings in the amount of the impact that we're going to see. We review that on a regular basis. It's part of the duties of our financial managers to review that, to review the source of funds and the way that we're capturing those dollars on a regular basis. So I don't see any significant positive change coming from that, unfortunately.
So you're
Follow
saying pennies on the dollar, maybe?
A de minimis impact, yeah.
Representative Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. White and Ms. Hebert for being here. So you say that the 24,000 includes a lot of overhead costs, each level of supervision above that. What if we took all those out and we just had the money strictly for the people that are working in this program? Have you computed that at all?
The benefit is that instead of using general funds for for those leadership positions, we're using federal funds. So I don't necessarily see a positive solution in that direction.
And within this second question, within this um, administrative group, how often do they reaffirm the eligibility for each of the members, the 75,000 people? How often is that?
Thank you for the question. 6 months redetermination.
Every 6 months? And how is that done?
So there's notification sent out to the participants with deadlines that they have to meet to reapply and provide the certain verification document that they use for their income and resources to ensure that they're still eligible. And
So if they
looking
say-
at any other household composition changes,
If they say they have 4 children, you have to see evidence, birth certificates or whatever.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further questions here? Okay. Oh, Representative Nalavanko?
So I have a question. So the 2026, there's a budgeted amount for 2026, am I correct? And is that similar to the 2025? I think you said this was the spend was really a budgeted number?
So our current adjusted authorized for 2026 is about $31 million. One of the key drivers, though, here is your personnel. And if you have a vacant position, it doesn't really matter what you budget, you won't earn those federal funds. However, what we also saw just as a reminder, in a number of areas, is a number of our positions were unfunded. We have about 400 unfunded positions, or almost thereby. We also have contracts, and if those contracts are not, if we don't incur those costs, most of our contracts are cost reimbursement only, then we wouldn't see an expense there, and we wouldn't earn those federal dollars. So your budget is always going to be higher than your expense, and you'll see that delta. And based on what we're seeing for vacancy rates, we would probably see a similar spend in this year. Obviously, we don't know exactly what that will be at this point in time. But because personnel, the eligibility workers are a key driver behind some of these costs, we won't have expenses near the 31 million.
Follow up?
Yeah, very brief follow-up. So if we're budgeted for 31 million, I think effectively, if I hear you correctly, we're actually usually wind up being under budget. Is that
We are under a hiring freeze, and in this particular area, very different from most of HHS budget. HHS budget only about a little less than 11% is actually personnel. But in some of these areas, this is personnel driven, and with the overall department vacancy rate currently standing at, as of yesterday, about 23%, that's going to generate areas where you're not going to see expenses.
just one? So, yeah, so one brief follow-up. Net, the impact on the SNAP program of all the moving parts on this would be what? Less money available for SNAP benefits?
SNAP benefits aren't budgeted.
I mean, the budgeted piece here, the spend total would be less.
Well, yes, the spend total, based on our estimate, will probably be somewhere in the vicinity of $26 million. We don't necessarily know yet, but it'll probably be somewhere in that vicinity, which is why when we prepared the fiscal note worksheet for the LBA, that's where we come up with the 4.4 million, because we were basing that on the state fiscal year 25 experience.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Weiler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Mr. Ripple. My assumption is if we pass this bill, this 4.4 million, one way or another, it's going to come out of the rainy day fund. Does that make sense?
It won't come out of the rainy day fund, but it means there'll be less money at the end of the biennium to go back into the rainy day fund. So essentially, yes, it would leave the rainy day fund with a smaller balance than otherwise.
Thank you.
And Mr. Ripple, while you're there, at this point, I'd like to, oh, do you have a question on that?
I had a question, sort of, for Mr. Ripple.
Okay, Representative Talarsky.
Can you clarify for me, just for understanding? We've obviously seen a more significant intake on the tax amnesty program that was in the budget, that was budgeted at 5 million, and now it's up over 60 million at last count, I think. Is that just going into the general fund? And is that part of the pot that would roll over to the rainy day fund?
Well, the business taxes that came through the amnesty program will be split between the general fund and the education trust fund. But yes, there's an excess of general fund revenue there that would go into the rainy day fund at the end of the biennium. What I would point out, though, is that even though revenues overall are slightly ahead of plan, there have also been other expenditures through the fiscal committee, for example. And so I think Mike Kane shared something with me earlier today. There was a very brief snapshot of where we're at this point in the fiscal year. I think he may have shared it with all of you as well. And in general funds, year to date, we're below the budget plan by about $3.1 million, even with amnesty.
Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, Mr. Ripple, at this point, I want to steer the conversation to Senate Bill 603 FN, and I'll give you a minute for those of you to look that up. Senate Bill 603 FN, the title is Relative to the Funding of the SNAP Program by the Department of Health and Human Services. Went to Senate Finance, came out of Senate Finance 8-0, and on the consent calendar. Mr. Ripple, could you take us through Senate Bill 603?
Sure. Senate Bill 603 would address the SNAP shortfall differently. It would simply require the department for this biennium to transfer funds from within its other accounting units to address that shortfall. And they would have to go through fiscal as per the usual process. But essentially, rather than providing new money, it would require the transfer from existing budgeted funds.
So it's essentially codifying what an option already.
Yes.
So we already have that option. This is codifying that.
Right.
Any comment on Senate Bill 603? I know this is not a hearing on that. However, your thoughts on that passage, recent passage, as I understand it?
I agree. All it does is codify exactly what we would have to do without an appropriation.
Understood. Representative Talarsky, and then followed by Representative Wallner.
Is this the equivalent of increasing the back of the budget by another 4.5 million?
I think that's a complicated question. So next state fiscal year, we obviously have the remaining 25.5 million. We will have to manage that. What we do every day is manage our budget, which is large and lengthy and complex. And I think a key to that is the department-wide transfer that the fiscal committee sees about 3 times a year. That request reflects basically all of the adjustments that we have to make on an ongoing basis, because again, our budget is a point of departure. How we would come up with the 4.4 million, I think, falls into kind of that category of what actions would need to be taken. So I don't necessarily know what that would mean. If enrollment in a particular program dropped off and spending went down, maybe funds would be freed up. Or on the sort of darker side of things, maybe we wouldn't have sufficient funds and we would have to amend a contract to liquidate those dollars to move those for this purpose. But I think in the broader picture, it would probably just be addressed as part of our budget equation that we have to figure out every day.
Can I just have a follow-up?
Yes, follow up.
So for those listening who may not be deep into the budget of DHHS, can I clarify that basically means there could be programs that would be cut to hit that $4.5 million and other services would be dropped?
I think that's where it gets complicated as far as whether there's a direct relationship. Like if for our back of the budget reductions this biennium, I can give an example. in December, and then last month we went through GNC to explicitly amend certain contracts to cut additional funding for new programming, things of that nature. Whether we moved money through those types of actions or whether we moved money through areas that we identified that would lapse, I think that's kind of the sort of the big question that I don't yet know the answer to and won't know the answer to until next year.
Thanks.
Representative Wallner is next. Same question. Okay. Representative Nalavenko.
So if this bill in front of us doesn't pass, does that mean anybody loses SNAP benefits?
No, they wouldn't lose the benefit. I think as Mr. White is describing, it's a matter of trying to determine what our response then and decisions would have to be for the administrative costs, but the benefits wouldn't be impacted.
Okay, thank you very much.
Certainly, we recognize the constraints of the Department of Health and Human Services. I can't emphasize that enough when my microphone is on, that you are undergoing next to the impossible based on the budget cuts, and you're doing a fantastic job navigating those back of the budget cuts, which last tally I received was $51 million total over 2 years. I do have concerns about covering the cost where the one big beautiful bill fails to fund. If we go down that road, our ultimate invoice will be enormous, and this could be a start of that. With that, Representative Stringham?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on Representative Nalavenko's last question too, because I thought I understood before one of the possibilities to try to fund the shortfall or handle the shortfall from the federal money that was built into the budget that would not arrive because of the change in formula wasn't a reduction in administrative staff in this program. And the potential, there is potential harm to the SNAC program if that's done. One, by potentially later on having an increased error rate, which would penalize us in some format. And another is possibly a slower administration or response time to beneficiaries, which may delay them becoming eligible for the program when in reality they are already eligible. And I wanted to ask whether I understood that correctly as one of the possible outcomes of not funding the program at the level that we had it in before. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, and your points are valid. I think that it gets to be a little bit tricky because we have an integrated eligibility system. So all of our eligibility staff work on all the other programs, Medicaid, child care, TANF, all the state supplemental programs like aid to the permanently and totally disabled. So the impact that this may have on staffing certainly is possible, maybe not in the immediate future there, but certainly possible in the more mid-term or long-term, as well as any deficiency, any further deficiency in staff certainly can impact our ability to process things timely, which can impact federal timeframes that are required, that puts the state at risk. But then, yes, of course, the inability to process things timely for families. So those are definitely concerns always in our ability to provide that quality of service that people deserve.
Representative Weiler, followed by Representative Nalavenko.
So the staff that checks the eligibility every 6 months, they check it for how many programs and how many staff do this?
So there are nearly 50 different types of eligibility programs, many of them Medicaid related. That's both federal and state funded programs that they process daily. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question.
How many
Oh,
staff
sorry,
are doing
yes.
all this eligibility?
So there are approximately 250 staff who are in the field operations. There are about 70 unfunded positions. And this particular area right now has a 25% vacancy rate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Representative Nalavanko?
I think at the last session, I think Representative Priest, if I'm not mistaken, asked a question about getting information on what all went into the error, definition around error rate and the calculations and the pieces of that were contributing to the error rate. Is that something that somebody was able to look at in the interim?
Yes, and I did provide earlier this week for a summary or an overview of the error rate process. Is that what you're referring to?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Who got that? Or maybe I missed it.
It's on the dashboard, isn't it?
Was it on the?
Is it buried in? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because I thought that I'm having a
Yeah.
hard time understanding, I think in line with what Representative Priest asked at the previous session, which part of that was, he didn't ask it in this fashion, but I'd like to think of it as which part of it is within the error rate is controllable by DHHS and which may be outside of their ability to control. And, and that, again, if it was a client making an honest mistake on filling
Sure.
out paperwork, it's something that is one type of an error. Another type of error is just a clerical error on the part of the administrative staff in DHHS. And I'm just trying to get my head around the whole issue of error rate.
Sure, they're largely, and thank you for the question, they are largely unintentional errors that are made, very often clerical errors by staff, such as incorrectly calculating a household's expenses, or perhaps even a misinterpretation of some federal regulation or policy. Sometimes we have participants who provide inaccurate or incomplete information just because of a misunderstanding as to what they should be providing. So then when we later learn the correct information and recalculate, either that may have resulted in an overpayment or underpayment, which the state will rectify with that particular participant. So if there's an overpayment, for example, we will recoup the overpayment. If there's an underpayment, then we have to pay them the difference there. So a lot of them that are a lot of the errors that are detected, we do then go through a process with a team of staff who review those errors extensively and try to identify what's the root cause so that we can then take corrective action we have to correct the cases certainly, but then we also look to see systemically what is it that we can improve upon that we do have control over.
Representative Nalavanko for a follow-up.
Not to oversimplify it, so if you had to say, these were in two buckets, controllable and uncontrollable, how would you, split those two buckets?
Sure, I think for the most part, they're controllable. However, we're a bit restricted in what it is that we can change, how we can change it, how quickly we can change it. So for example, if there is a need to improve upon taking a manual process and changing it into something that's automated, that would be very helpful. Then there's a cost associated with that, which we may not be able to acquire quickly, if at all. So it's really trying to then identify what are the alternative methods that we can use to make those improvements, and much of them are manual. So then incorporating the right amount of training at the right time to the right people.
Okay, thank you for the explanation.
Representative Wallner's next.
Thank you. Thank you. So would you review again for me, or for all of us, the future of the error rate? Isn't there, right now, we have an error rate above the 6%, is that right? And there's going to come a time when if the error rate is more than 6%, we are going to face penalties?
So, two things. So, first, the changes in the federal law in H.R. 1, basically, as of October 1st in 2027, changes the state's cost share of those benefits. So, where they have been 100% federally funded, now depending on the state's error rate, will determine what the state's cost share will be. And there are 3 levels. So if our error rate is between 6 and 7.99%, we will have to pay a 5%, the 5% match. If the error rate is between 8 and 9.99%, we would be looking at a 10% match. And then finally, if our error rate is over 10%, the state would be looking at a 15% match. So in fiscal year 2024, the error rate is officially 7.57%. So if this were to be the year to apply a state's share, we would be looking at a 5% match.
Follow up.
So knowing that that's coming, wouldn't this be the time to really be working with staff and the people doing the eligibility to be sure that we can get below that 6%? I mean, this is the time to prepare
Yes.
for what we see coming.
And we have been working with a collaborative team from across the department, including both in our quality control area of the department, with our SNAP administrators, with our field operations staff, and others to do that deep dive into root causes based on not just what the errors have been, but we have been looking and analyzing our own case reviews to try to determine where are other errors that could be caught that we could correct before that were to happen. So we're looking at what are the highest items that are causing errors, and then what is our corrective action that we can take, or not necessarily corrective action, but really proactive changes to either a process, maybe it's a communication, like a notice to customers, that if they're routinely misunderstood, then we need to change them. Or is it something in the way the screens look and how information is inputted into the system? So there are a variety of strategies to mitigate the error that we've been working on for the last, since I've been in this role for 4 years. And we will continue to do that, even though our rate did come down, I think, which is indicative of how some of these strategies are working. So we, in fiscal year 23, had an error rate of 12.53%. So coming down from that to 7.57 tells me that we're on the right track. So we are making every possible effort to get below that 6%. We also received a federal grant for performance and technology improvements of $1.1 million, specifically to make system enhancements. So it's a 100% federally funded grant that we will be implementing as soon as we have the contracts approved in place to make those particular enhancements to our system. So we've identified a number of things that we can do in the system with those funds.
Question.
Follow-up, Representative Wallner, followed by Representative Weiler.
So I just did, very quickly did a calculation. So if we don't get below, if we don't get to that 6 and we stay around 7% error rate, that is, we're looking at an additional $7 to $8 million that it would cost the state. So our efforts should be to get to that 6% or less.
Absolutely, yes, thank you.
Representative Weiler.
Thank you. Does the change from 50/50 to 25/75 reflection of the error rate? Is that affected at all by that?
No, I would say no.
Is that something done nationally as far as
Yes.
anybody knows?
Yes.
Thank you.
And in the document that was just handed out, if you turn to table 2 on the last page, per Chairman Weiler's question and Representative Wallner's question, there's a table there, and it breaks down the 2 major cost drivers that we're looking at. The first is the national change of the administrative rate going from 50/50 to 75/25, and then the state cost share. And there's 3 various options there, as Karen had articulated. And the reason that you're seeing the impact in state fiscal year 27 for the administrative costs is because it's going into effect in that federal fiscal year. And then in 28, that only represents 3/4 of the state fiscal year. We have the same federal fiscal year timing issue there. And then by 29, that's where you're seeing the full implementation of those changes. And I think one important thing when we're thinking about staffing is the work that Karen's team does is very complex, and there's a lot of federal regulations. And so if you invest in staff now, it gives the team time to learn the program and be trained on the policies. And there's a lot of other eligibility that they do as well. And then there's going to be a timing delay as well. So depending on when we bring those staff in and when those errors are identified, there's almost like a downstream, like a delayed 1 to 2 year impact. So if you invest today and you have a positive change on your impact, then you're not going to have those federal costs. But if you, let's say we don't invest, let's say we reduce funding for the program, then years down the road, the state's going to end up paying a lot more if those error rates go over that 10% threshold, where you're looking at almost $24 million a year, which is a lot more expensive than funding the positions.
Thank you for that explanation. Okay, at this point, I want to thank you both. I'd like to caucus. Yeah, go ahead. Representative Tularsky, another question or comment?
I just know that someone from New Hampshire Hunger Solutions is here, and I don't know if they have anything to contribute to the conversation.
All right. Anything to contribute?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. At this point, I'd like to caucus for, let's say, 10 or so minutes, if that's possible. Republicans can stay in here, and Democrats, do you mind across the hall? I hope that's vacant to you. I do want to be sure we are off YouTube. So at this point, we're going to caucus, take a break. We will be back in approximately 10 or so minutes.
How long do we have?
Okay.
I've been way worse than this.
We're going to call back into session Division 3. This is a work session continued now on House Bill 1750, only House Bill 1750, here on Friday, February 20th, 2026. So we both have had time to caucus, both parties here. Again, a very difficult bill under very difficult circumstances with the Department of Health and Human Services. We don't overlook that point. And at this point, I think we are ready to discuss the motion process. So we'll discuss a motion if one will be made.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I shall make a motion on House Bill 1750 FN to ITL.
Okay, a motion to ITL. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Farrington. Any further discussion? And we have now had a few work sessions on this bill, and I appreciate all of the information that was both given in testimony and provided to us in writing related to this bill. It was all very helpful for our discussions. Any discussion? Representative Talarsky.
Thank you. I think that it will come as no surprise that I will not be supporting the ITL. I think we've had a number of hours of testimony, both on this bill, but also in the budget process, to understand the complex nature of what goes into these programs and the impact that the program has, not only on people who utilize the resource to put food on their table, but the businesses that actually take in these dollars that are coming into the state. Off the top, I think it's like 170 million, 180 million dollars or something that gets spent in stores right here in New Hampshire, and the economic impact on our state cannot be downplayed. I think we heard a lot about the error rate situation and the fact that we are only setting ourselves up for failure by not investing properly at this time to hire staff, train staff, get our processes fine-tuned. And all of this is because a mid-biennium budget change from the feds with HR 1 that was signed 3 days after our budget went into effect. We know, for example, that sometimes the best laid plans get turned upside down. This is one of those situations. We budgeted properly the way that we discussed this and within our means to have this program run. And now Washington is telling us, sorry, we're going to tip over the apple cart. And that happens sometimes. But I think we need to act prudently, pass this bill, ensure that we are not putting the department further back on their heels in this, because as we saw today, the way that this is going to snowball in future years into much larger expenses from us, it's clear that we should invest now to ensure that we have the proper system set up. So, thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Stringham and then Representative Weiler.
Sure, thank you very much. I agree with my colleague. This is a very unique circumstances in dealing in a year with deep back of the budget cuts already. The circumstances here that brought this up were external, and the needs critical to make sure that this program continues to invest properly and make improvements in the error rates that they've demonstrated that they've done over the past several years. I think an OTP motion better speaks to the circumstances, sends a message that conveying the transparency of the process that got us where they are and the importance not just of the program itself, which is obvious, but also proper management of it if it's going to continue to serve the granite state. By just saying we'll leave it to the department to do everything, which is what an ITL motion does, I think it sends the wrong message and buries the circumstances that put this situation to us. So I will vote against ITL and would instead recommend an OTP.
Representative Weiler.
Well, even if we put 4 million in this program, it doesn't change the fact that there's a 24% vacancy rate and a hiring freeze. So perhaps the vacancy rate might be the reason for the error rate. And not much we can do about that until we get over a hiring freeze and get more money totally. But the other thing that brings to mind is the fiscal committee put a couple of $1 million in contributions to the food bank to make up for the fact that people were not getting all the SNAP benefits. It wasn't very well utilized. And it also brings to fact the people that are in line behind somebody with an EBT card are seeing luxury items and junk food being bought with an EBT card, which is something else that, unless we have legislation that goes to the grocery stores, there's not much we can do about it. But, that those things occur to me, that there's some mishandling all along the lines in this, and I don't think this bill is going to fix it. Thank you.
Representative Nalavanko for
I mean, just to make a comment on partially what Chairman Weiler was addressing, we discussed it in a previous work session, but I still, have some issues around the end part of SNAP, which is nutrition, and I think that it addresses our objective here is not only to make sure people are getting food, however you want to define that, but also that it's nutritious food, and so far, the state hasn't signed on to the voluntary program to eliminate soda and power drinks and any number of other things that are being, in my opinion, abused in that whole system. So that's another concern. As I said, we didn't discuss that fully today, but we had touched on that in the previous work session. So we definitely need to press to have some reforms in that whole area. Thank you.
to follow on what you were saying, one thing about this number in the fiscal note is that it is possible the number will increase. And in discussions on Senate Bill 603, I know that was mentioned, that there is a possibility the 4.4 number may be a low ball. With regards to so-called junk food, I know the Senate is working on that. What they'll come out with, I don't know. But I was also informed that that fiscal note is over $1 million to regulate, which would add to this number. So already we know the number is growing by leaps and bounds potentially. So we're dealing with a fluid number, and all the more reason why it gives me pause to see what exactly we're covering from the feds, considering this number could get higher and higher, and so-called junk food could be the reason. With that, I'm going to call for the roll. Oh, Representative Wallner. Okay. When the clerk is ready, the roll.
Madam Chair, calling the roll on House Bill 1750 FN. The clerk votes yay on the motion to ITL. Representative Weiler. Yes. Representative Farrington.
Yes.
Representative Talerski.
No.
Representative Wallner.
No.
Representative Stringham.
No.
Representative Giason.
Guyson, yes.
Giason. Representative Mattson.
Yes.
Representative Mooney.
Yes.
Committee vote is 6 yeas in favor of the motion to ITL and 3 nays. So the motion to ITL passes on a vote of 6-3.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other motions? All right, at this point, we're going to take that up at 2:30 today. Full finance meets last I knew, weather pending, I suppose, but 2:30 is the meet time for full finance. So at that time, blurbs, Mr. Chairman, need to be completed by the end of today. So if there's a blurb that's going to be an alternative motion to this bill, just know the deadline is today. Anything further from Division 3 at our work session, February 20th? Okay, at that point, we're going to close it, and we'll see you at full finance at 2:30. Thank you all.